Today, we'll be playing Pokemon Crystal, where our only Pokemon we're going to be using is a single Tyranitar, and we won't be using items in battle. Further rules will be in the video description. So let's get started by grabbing our level 5 Tyranitar by swapping out Totodile with the Universal Pokemon Randomizer. I name it T-Rex because it's a nice name change compared to the typical Godzilla that people name Tyranitar. Now, as we work our way to Mr. Pokemon and Professor Oak, do you guys have much experience using this Pokemon? It's a pretty darn popular Pokemon in the later generations. I personally have a lot of memories training Pupitar, getting it to evolve into Tyranitar, because the Pokemon in Mount Silver don't really give all that much experience, and since this is the generation before the Versus Seeker was invented, we couldn't exactly just re-battle all the trainers. We kinda just had to battle either the Elite Four or battle the Pokemon in the wild. Meanwhile, in the gameplay, we're just now getting to Mr. Pokemon and Professor Oak. He gives us some good advice, gives us the Pokedex, and we move on after a quick heal from Mr. Pokemon. But then, we get a quick call from Professor Elm, who tells us New Barktown has got some news. We make our way back to New Barktown. However, we get interrupted by this red-haired fellow. He introduces himself as Triple Question Mark, and he's got a Chikorita, which is very weird. That's one of the Pokemon from Professor Elm's lab. Anyways, we take it down with a few bites and then work our way over to Professor Elm. But there happens to be a police officer. I wonder why. We tell him that the name of the perpetrator that we ran into with the red hair is Triple Question Mark. We attempt to leave, but Professor Elm then tells us we've got some things to do. And because we did so good in battling, we should consider taking the Pokemon Challenge. After a quick handoff from his aide, we then get some Pokeballs, and we run into this Bellsprout. Well, Bellsprout is great for cut and flash, so I go ahead and decide that I want to catch this Bellsprout, and use 2 Pokeballs to go ahead and catch it, add it to the team. Of course, this Bellsprout's never actually going to be used in battle. After our arrival to Violet City, I take a moment to admire the Tin Tower, and I work my way to the top of the tower, where I finally arrive, but there happens to be that red fellow again. He decides that he makes fun of old people. After making fun of us, we then go ahead and talk to the Elder, and the Elder tells us that we need to actually beat him in order to get the Flash HM. So we go ahead and do that, and he hands us Flash, and we work our way out. With nowhere else left to go, I decide that, hey, there's a gym. Maybe we're good enough to actually become the champion of the Johto League. After some quick victories against 2 trainers that have very few and weak Pokemon, we then battle the gym leader himself, Falconer. But this gym is not really going to be much of an issue. With our lucky T-Rex on our side, we're going to take 2 chomps out of our little birdie friends, and we already get ourselves the victory. And he hands us the TM for Mudslap, which just doesn't happen to be a very good move. From here, we can then head south towards Union Cave. However, there's not a move we want in Union Cave this time, so we walk our way right through Union Cave, but we accidentally battled Hiker Anthony. And normally I don't show you these battles because they're usually not a big deal. In fact, we take down Geodude and we don't even really get damaged. However, Machop here, low kick, knocks us down to 1 HP, and we really get a dose of reality just how much of a 4 times weakness to fighting moves really is. Once in Azalea Town, we then arrive over to Kurt's house, who tells us things are happening in Slowpoke's cave. We defeat the final Rocket, who then tells us Team Rocket's back, baby. After getting the lure ball from Kurt, we then decide it's time to battle the gym. This gym leader is Bugsy. However, Bugsy's team is not very strong whatsoever, so we go ahead and take down Metapod with 1 bite, followed by Kakuna with 1 bite, but now we have Scyther, and we do have a weakness to bug moves. However, Scyther is not able to get enough Fury Cutters together before we can defeat it with a few bites. With our new badge and our hopes definitely high, we then head west towards Ilex Forest, where we accidentally battle the red-haired rival once again. The rival has decided that he is going to be a thorn in our side because he's got new Pokemon and a new way on life. He thinks he's the best, and therefore he needs to fight the best to prove his worthiness. Unfortunately, he's not worthy today in this battle. In the Ilex Forest, there's only one thing we can do. We have to find this Farfetch'd and return it to its owner, who's somehow lost his Farfetch'd in the perpetually dark forest. With the far-fetched return, he then gives us Cut as a thank you. We go ahead and teach it to Bellsprout and move our way forward. However, we're not going to move far, as we then talk to the Headbutt Master, who gives us Headbutt, which is going to be one of our staple moves for quite some time. Headbutt is a darn good move, so we teach it immediately. We then arrive into Goldenrod City, where we have a few errands to run before we can actually do anything of note. First thing we do is pick up the coin case. This will be explained later. Then we get a haircut, which will also be explained later. Later has already arrived as we pick up 100 coins and then get the prize of an Abra. Abra is not a very good Pokemon, and since it's a solo run, we can't really use it. However, in this case, we get the teleport that defaultly comes with Abra, followed by then heading to the radio station, where we get the radio card, which will be used much later. Followed by then, at the edge of the city, we talk to this guard, who then gives us Kenya, which will be taught fly later on in the run. Inside the park, right at the front, we talk to this girl, who gives us the Quick Claw, which I like to use on Pokemon that are very slow. However, we run into a roadblock and talk to this girl, who tells us that her sister is going to be able to give us the Squirt Bottle if we can best Whitney. That certainly sounds like a good proposition, so we make our way towards Whitney and have no issues doing so. I love Whitney. Her Clefairy always starts out with Metronome, but not this time, as it uses Double Slap, which is very, very odd because it's a resisted move, which is even more of a reason to use Metronome. Meanwhile, we defeat Whitney with that last bite. However, it's not over yet, as Whitney is now uncontrollably crying, and her trainer needs to remind me to pick up the badge. She then hands over the badge, and we can now work our way over to the Flower Girl's house, where she sees our badge and then deems us worthy of the Squirt Bottle. However, we're going to make a short trip to the Goldenrod Mart to pick up Fire Punch, which will be used later. With Squirt Bottle in hand, we then head over to the Sudowoodo, use the Squirt Bottle, and then battle the thing. But it's not mandatory to defeat Sudowoodo, so I run away. Now, with access to Ecruteak City, I then head over to the Kimono Girls. These girls sport all of the Eevee evolutions, and I must defeat them in order to obtain Surf from the old man. Once all of them are defeated, I can then make my way to the Burned Tower, where we're going to be looking for some legendaries. However, while we're looking, we then run into the red-haired rival once again, who is also looking for the legendaries and can't find any, and challenges us to a battle. However, this battle is of course going to still be easy. In Azalea Town, he proclaimed that he wants to be the best trainer that ever was, just like Red. However, he does not seem to be proving it. He is doing a pretty good job. He's gotten my Pokemon down to 32, but that's just not enough, and we get ourselves the win. However, the floor then falls right underneath us, and that allows us to see, oh my god, it's the legendary beasts! But they run away, so there's nowhere else left to go but to the gym leader, Morty. But today, we've got the perfect Pokemon for Morty, as Tyranitar is part Dark type, and we start out with Bite, which is a Dark move, and Dark moves are super effective against Ghost types, and therefore, I'm easily able to trounce her entire team. Gengar, however, did manage to get one hit in. From here, the game definitely opens up, and we can work our way south towards Olivine City, where we go into this building, where this guy gives us the Good Rod. And the Good Rod can be used to catch a Krabby. Krabby is great for Cut, Surf, Strength, and Whirlpool. However, this first Krabby is quite the catch because it manages to not be caught by a Lure Ball or 3 Pokeballs. Mind you, Krabby is a very easy Pokemon to catch. After restocking with some more Great Balls, I then head back to the ocean to give it another go. Now, we did lose a little bit of time there not catching that first Krabby. However, Krabby's spawn rate is 55%, so it shouldn't be a very big deal to catch another one. But we then face 4 more Magikarps before we come up to the next Krabby. Because I didn't want to repeat what happened last time, I decided to give it a Headbutt, but I accidentally crit, knock it out. The very next Pokemon is another Krabby, and we give it another Headbutt. However, this one also manages to crit too. But the next catch is a Magikarp, followed by another Staryu, which is crazy. But then the next attempt is another Krabby, which manages to get hit by a headbutt, take enough damage to not be knocked down, and our first Great Ball then catches it. After our fishing problems are over, we can then work our way to this guy, who gives us the HM for strength, followed by then going over to the lighthouse where we pick up the rare candy. Then meet up with Jasmine at the top of the lighthouse, where she tells us about the sick Ampharos, and we need to go ahead and get the secret potion, heal it up before we can battle her. After a quick surf to Cianwood City, I then decide that we should be able to take on Chuck and get ourselves the badge. But as we approach the first trainer in the gym, you can probably imagine this doesn't go very well because usually I don't show trainer battles. The first trainer then uses a Hitmonlee, and you can probably see where this is going, as it then uses a jump kick. We're certainly not going to survive another one of those, and we didn't. Jump kick is one of those moves that seems to change all of the time. In this generation, if you miss, you take 1/8 of the damage dealt. Unfortunately, the miss chance is only 5%. And a power of 70 normally isn't very high, but with a 4 times weakness, a power of 70 may as well be 2 hyper beams. So it'll come to nobody's surprise that it wasn't until attempt 3 where something good finally happened. It was a critical hit on our end, because a 5% chance of a miss is probably just too low. The next Pokemon to come out is a Hitmonchan. Unfortunately, it's going to be a 3-shot as well here. Luckily for me, it uses elemental punch moves, so we get ourselves the win, but it's very lucky. And we're not done yet. There's still more trainers left in this gym. But before we get to those trainers, I make sure to pick up the secret potion because I accidentally forgot it before walking into the gym. So we make our way to the next trainer, who's got a Machop. And the Machop is not that bad. It's only got Karate Chop, which manages a critical hit, bringing us to Machoke. And Machoke is going to be a lot stronger than Machop, especially since we're going to be confused. That last attempt was pretty unlucky. Karate Chop is not going to hit for a critical hit every single time like it does in Generation 1. However, in Generation 2, they changed up Karate Chop. They gave it the fighting type, and it's not going to miss, so it's going to be consistent damage every time. To nobody's surprise, I end up losing 2 more times before we finally get to this attempt, where Machop uses Seismic Toss and Machoke uses Rock Slide. Very weird. I don't know what the heck happened there, but I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth and say no. Unfortunately, our gym trainer slaughter is not complete, as we still have this guy who's got a Mankey. We use our Outrage and manage to one-shot it, because Mankey's defenses are pretty bad. We can take down the second Mankey, but now it brings us to Primeape, and we're confused. Luckily, Primeape just uses a Rage, and even though Rage builds, it's not going to build enough. Which brings us to the big kahuna, the guy I've never lost to in my entire life, Chuck. Chuck only has 2 Pokemon, however they're pretty heavy hitters in Primeape and Poliwrath. Primeape is not that much of a concern, however for Poliwrath I'm going to go in confused, and unfortunately Dynamic Punch hits on its first attempt. So here's the situation then. On most attempts, Primeape is going to start off with a Leer, softening us up for the Dynamic Punch from Poliwrath. Dynamic Punch, on the other hand, is a very inaccurate move, with only 50% accuracy, but it has 100 power, and with a Leer, add an extra 50% on top of that, and our 4 times weakness, basically making it a one-hit KO move. Outrage is our best move to use, and it's a 4-hit on Poliwrath. So, we need to not get confused 4 times, and we need to hit him 4 times. Well, he misses 4 times, so the situation is unlikely to happen. But, as you know, everything is going to eventually happen in Pokemon. So, this is the attempt where everything goes right. We enter the battle with a defense drop, and we're confused. He misses 2 Dynamic Punches right off the bat, and misses a 3rd, allowing our next Outrage to get the win. Now, outside of our Weezing run in Generation 1, this has been the worst battle we have ever had. We entered the fighting gym at 0 resets, and we're leaving at 14 resets. Just let that sink in. Anyways, we have to move on, and right outside of Chuck's gym is Chuck's wife, who gives us Fly, and allows us to fly back to Ecruteak, where we can surf over to Mahogany, and then go north to Lake of Rage, where I pick up the rare candy in the northwest corner. and then battle the Gyarados and take it down with a Rock Slide, followed by meeting up with Lance at the Rocket Hideout. But I'm going to go ahead and skip most of the hideout, and we meet up with Lance at the end of the hideout where we take down the Electrodes, where he gives us Whirlpool, which I can teach to Krabby, and then the Mahogany Gym, where the doors are not being blocked by a rocket anymore, and we can battle Price. Price is a notoriously easy gym leader, and this is because this late in the game, we've done so much training between the Rockets, the wild Pokemon, all the spinner trainers, that he just doesn't have the levels to keep up. His Pokemon actually have pretty decent moves, but unfortunately his Pokemon are just too slow and under-leveled to be able to use them. Anyways, from here we drop off the secret potion over at Jasmine, who then tells us the Ampharos is fine and will return to the gym. However, before we arrive to the gym, we're going to go ahead and teach our T-Rex Fire Punch, and this is going to make the battle go from almost impossible to very easy. So let's make our way over to Jasmine. Jasmine is typically one of the most difficult gyms in the entire game. Some may even say the biggest challenge in the entire game, unless you have one of two moves, either Dig or Fire Punch. Because the Steel typing resists almost all other types, it's really difficult to defeat her if you don't have one of those two moves. Of course you could have other ground moves or fire moves, but these are the usual TMs that you can pick up by this point of the game. After defeating Jasmine, we get a phone call from Professor Elm, who then says there's something wrong with the radio tower. However, before we start running errands for other people, we need to run some errands ourselves, like picking up the return TM, the rare candy south of Goldenrod, the other rare candy northeast of Violet City, and the PP up northwest of Violet City. From there, we can head to the radio tower and defeat all of the Rockets until we get to the top, where we defeat the fake director, who gives us the basement key. We then use said basement key, and on our way through the Rocket section, we then fight the red-haired rival once again. However, this rival is not going to be too difficult, as we now have a pretty darn diverse moveset, so we can take down Golbat with a Rock Slide, followed by Meganium with a Fire Punch, which then levels us up to level 39, where we can then move on to Magnemite and take that out with another Fire Punch, taking us to Sneasel, which is weak to a Rock Slide. And then for Haunter, I'm out of Bite PP, so I have to rely on a Rock Slide. Luckily, its defense is just so low it doesn't even matter. Which then takes us to the real director, who gives us the card key. We use said card key on the radio tower and then defeat the boss Rocket, who then leaves after being defeated. But before leaving the radio tower, we then pick up the pink bow, which will increase our return attack later on. Now that the Rockets have been defeated, Ice Cave is now open to us, where we can pick up a few items before we leave Ice Cave, such as HM07 Waterfall, then the TM for Rest, and lastly an extra PPO, which takes us to Blackthorn City, where there's nothing to do except for face the gym leader Claire. This Claire battle is the entire reason why we've kept Outrage on our moveset the entire game. However, she then switches to Seadra next, which does not get taken down by a single Outrage, and now we have to switch attacks. But we're now confused, which is going to make this battle significantly harder. Luckily, the bite does go through Confusion, followed by the next Outrage, which takes down Kingra, and we can move on to the next Dragonair, which is taken down with an Outrage. And then we move on to the last Dragonair, but we're confused. Luckily, we make it through the Confusion, and we get through a very, very difficult Claire battle, which should not have gone that way. However, Claire does have a mind of her own, and she can use whatever Pokemon she wants. I just figured that she would use all of her Dragonairs first. After a quick chat with Claire, we then need to head over to the Dragon's Den, north of the gym. After passing his test, he then makes fun of Claire, saying that she's just not the trainer that we are. And afterwards, she then comes back and hands us the badge, and a TM for Dragon Breath, which we won't use. Our business here is not yet complete though. We need to grab the Dratini from the old man, which is going to be used for Waterfall. And after that, Professor Elm then gives us a call and tells us to head back to his laboratory, where he then proceeds to give us the Master Ball and tells us we're allowed to go to the Indigo Plateau. On the way to Victory Row, we then pick up this rare candy, followed by a quick journey through Victory Road, where we then fight the red-haired rival once again. Sometimes this battle can actually be quite difficult if you can be outsped by the Magneton, because then the Magneton will use Thunder Wave, followed by him then using the Haunter, which will use Curse. However, today that's not going to be the issue. Not because we're going to be outsped, but because Meganium actually poisoned us, therefore we're not going to be susceptible to being paralyzed. Not to mention, we actually took down Magneton in one hit. Plus, we're actually able to take down Haunter in one hit thanks to a bite, followed by the Kadabra, which has never used an actual attack on me, down in one hit with another bite. Now that that battle's over, we can actually upgrade our moveset just a little bit more, as we can teach over Outrage with Return. And Fire Punch is now not going to be useful because there's no more steel types in our path, so we can go ahead and teach over Fire Punch with Earthquake, making us fully prepared for the rest of the Elite Four, starting with Will. Now, unfortunately for Will, he's been actually quite a punching bag on this channel because we've had Shadow Ball with just about every single Pokemon we've used on the channel, and today's not going to be any exception as we have Bite to work with. Not to mention, we actually just upgraded Bite to Crunch after that first battle, which is quite convenient because it'll be useful for the rest of this battle. I wish I could say that this battle was a clean sweep of one-shots. However, the Xatu did get a quick attack in, and that's the only damage we ended up taking us to Koga, fresh off the promotion from being a gym leader. Koga then starts off with Ariados, which then uses a Baton Pass, which I thought you were supposed to actually accumulate some stats before you use Baton Pass. Anyways, we take down Fortress with 2 Rock Slides, taking us back to Ariados, which is then taken out with a Rock Slide, taking us to Muk, which we can then use Earthquake because it's very weak to ground moves, allowing us to move on to Crobat, in which we then outspeed thanks to the Quick Claw and take it down with a Rock Slide, taking us to Venomoth, which we miss a Rock Slide, allowing him to use Supersonic, but then the next Rock Slide manages to hit and get us through Koga, taking us to Bruno, which could actually be quite a difficult battle if his Pokemon managed to hit me with their fighting moves. Luckily, Hitmontop has no such moves, and we can almost take it down with a return, but unfortunately we have to take a super effective dig, which doesn't actually do a whole lot of damage, taking us to Hitmonlee, which we take down in one hit thanks to a critical hit. Hitmonchan then uses a priority Mach Punch, which is always going to do a pretty decent amount of damage to us, allowing us to move on to Onix, which we take down with an Earthquake. Last is Machamp, which is not taken down with a return, followed by us getting taken down with a Cross Chop. On the next attempt, we make it back to Machamp with similar HP thanks to Hitmonlee not requiring a crit. However, he takes us down with one Cross Chop as well. On the following attempt, we make it back with even lower HP, and he takes us down with another Cross Chop. At this point, there's really not much I can do to change this battle, because from a strategy standpoint, the only moves I'm taking is a Dig, a Mach Punch, and a Cross Chop. If I were to get a critical hit against Hitmontop, it really wouldn't change much because I'm not taking much damage from Dig. Hitmonchan's damage is unavoidable because Mach Punch is a priority move and it's always going to hit, and from here, it seems like we're always going to get one-shot by the Machamp if we can't one-shot it ourselves. Luckily, on the next attempt, we managed to get a critical hit and get by Bruno for the first time, which will then take us to Karen, the rival 2 of Gen 2, and you'll find out why. The reason is, of course, the Umbreon. It's very tanky with high defense stats, as you can see, and it always pretty much survives a hit, and it's usually going to use Sand Attack or Confuse Ray. In this run, we've been hit by a Sand Attack, which can be denoted by the -1 next to the HP stat in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Unfortunately for Vileplume, we miss 5 crunches in a row, and therefore get knocked out. On the next attempt, we managed to get a critical hit on the Umbreon, therefore bypassing it and not having to get confused or accuracy dropped, therefore allowing us to get by Vileplume, also thanks to a Stun Spore miss. And since she doesn't have a fighting type on the rest of her team, this shouldn't go too bad as we move on to Houndoom. An interesting thing to note here is that Houndoom uses Roar, which means I need to switch back into my Pokemon. But on the turn that we come back out, he just uses a Flamethrower, which doesn't do a whole lot of damage because we resist both Dark types and Fire type moves, taking us to Gengar, which could be a problem if it used Curse, but luckily it just uses Lick and we take it out with one single crunch, allowing us to move on to Lance, the Flying type Elite Four member. Typically, in all of my Johto videos so far, Lance is usually the hardest member of the Elite Four. However, today we have a Pokemon with Rock Slide, and therefore we're going to have a super effective move for every single one of his Pokemon, including Charizard, which has a 4 times weakness to rock moves. Interestingly enough, Tyranitar is relatively fast enough to get through the rest of the team except for Aerodactyl. But for the Dragonite number 2, we miss a Rock Slide and therefore get hit with a Paralysis, meaning we're most likely going to at least miss another move, and we're going to take a hit every single turn. Unfortunately, we get hit by a flinch and a Paralysis against Aerodactyl, doing its best, but he still loses and we get ourselves the victory. And with that, we become the champion of the Pokemon League, once again, with just a Tyranitar. But that's not all, we still have the Kanto region. So after a quick reset, we get a call from Professor Elm saying we should visit his lab. He then hands us the SS ticket and we can move on to the SS Aqua. Since I don't foresee us running into any issues with the Kanto gym leaders, I'm going to go ahead and skip the move tutor, which will allow us to learn Ice Beam or Thunderbolt. Upon arriving at the SS Aqua, we run into this old guy who informs us of his missing granddaughter and that we should keep an eye out for her. On our way to the captain's quarters, we then run into this sailor who tells us that his friend is missing. So we need to go ahead and find that sailor first. We then find said sailor sleeping in this room. After a quick battle, he then gets back to work and allows us to move on to the captain's quarters, where we meet the little girl trying to play with the captain. We inform the little girl of her grandfather, and she returns to him right away. And with that, we have finally arrived to Kanto. First thing we're going to do is talk to the Pokemon Fan Club's leader, who's going to give us a rare candy instead of the bike voucher. Thanks to fellow Poketuber Squidgy, we're actually going to then head north and then west to Celadon City, where we're going to fight Erica next. Erica is typically a little bit out of the way, so it's a pretty good idea to battle her first. Gen 2 Erica is actually quite weird. Because Gen 1 Erica always had the crit rate from Victory Bell and Razor Leaf, she was always going to be a challenge for slower Pokemon, or even water Pokemon. However, because she doesn't have the automatic crit rate of Razor Leaf, she's just kind of there. And as you can tell, with her levels, they're not that much lower. Her just Pokemon are flat out weak. We can basically 1 or 2 shot all of them. With Erica defeated, we can then move on to the Gen 2 post-game storyline, which starts off with us heading east of Cerulean City to the power plant that usually houses Zapdos, where we talk to the plant manager in the middle of the building and he tells us about a missing engine part. Next up is heading to the Cerulean Gym, where we can hopefully run into Misty. Unfortunately, she's not there, and a rocket tells us that we need to scram. Taking his advice, we then head over to Bill's house, where we fight all of the trainers that were on Nugget Bridge, and then run into Misty, where she's apparently on a date and calls us a pest for annoying her. But she recognizes that she needs to do her gym leader duties and heads back over to the gym. On the way to challenging Misty, we pick up the machine part that's hidden here in the water, and then go ahead and talk to Misty, skipping all of the trainers in between. Misty could certainly end up being a very difficult challenge because her water Pokemon have an advantage over us. Luckily, her Pokemon just aren't that fast, and we can get through her first 2 Pokemon in 1 shot apiece, taking us on to Lapras, which is also going to end up being a 1-shot, but thanks to a crit. However, Starmie is going to be able to outspeed and confuse us, where then she takes advantage of the moment, hits us with a Surf. Luckily, the next shot doesn't hit ourselves, and we take down Misty with 1 crunch. From here, we can then head back down south to Vermilion City Gym, where we then take on Surge. Electric types actually only have 1 weakness. Luckily, we have Earthquake, and therefore we're going to be able to take advantage of the weakness. Unfortunately for us, Electrode actually is faster than us, but is unable to deal very much damage, as we can then start wrecking her entire team using Earthquakes. And we even managed to get past that double team, which could have been a problem if we certainly missed. But he's just a 1-shot sweep. However, it was an error to go to his gym in the first place, as I was supposed to drop off the machine parts to the plant manager, allowing us to move on through the story where we talk to this guy at Lavender Town who gives us the EXPN card, which is a mod for the radio card we earned earlier in Goldenrod City. which we can access the radio channel that will allow us to use the Pokeflute. The Pokeflute, of course, being useful against the Snorlax, which we catch with the Master Ball because it's holding a leftovers that we certainly want to use, as the Quick Claw has become quite outdated. And now Snorlax is out of the way, we can head through the Diglett tunnel and then towards Brock. And Brock's Pokemon are going to be quite slow in comparison to Tyranitar, and with a move like Earthquake on our side, we're going to have a super effective move on every single one of his Pokemon. So even though he has Amistar and Kabutops on his team, which both know Surf, he's not going to get an opportunity to use Surf, and therefore it's going to net ourselves an easy win against Brock, allowing us to get a quick start towards Cinnabar Island, where we run into the final gym leader, Blue, you know, the antagonist from the first game. He regales us of how he used to be the champion and that he's gotta go, which is fine by us because we need to pick up this rare candy and make our way towards Blaine, who's on an island east of Cinnabar. But unfortunately for Blaine, just like every Pokemon that I've done on the channel, we have a super effective move and his team kinda sucks. So we're going to be able to take down his whole team using either Earthquake or Rock Slide, depending on the weaknesses. And that was it. Then we make our way east through the ocean and arrive at Fuchsia City, where we can take on Janine. Janine is known as one of the weakest gym leaders to ever exist. And it's not because their Pokemon are bad, it's because they're just so incredibly underleveled. They're level 36. And outside of Crobat, they're actually quite slow on top of it. So, for the majority of people by now, you have a move that can one-shot sweep her entire team, and that's exactly what happens. Next up is Sabrina, one of the reasons we've kept Crunch on our moveset this entire time, despite being a physical attacker. One of the reasons to put off Sabrina till the end of Kanto instead of doing her first or second because she's incredibly available is so we can outspeed Alakazam, which we did successfully, and we took down Alakazam in one hit. To be fair, we do have an immunity to psychic moves, but you gotta remember, I've been playing Gen 1 this entire time, and Gen 1, you fear psychic types. With that, we have all badges except for the Viridian City badge, so we make our way over to Blue. Of all the gym leaders, Blue definitely stands the best chance at winning because his Pokemon are 10 levels higher than the rest of the gym leaders, and his team is extremely balanced. But you gotta remember, we've got a pretty good Pokemon with leftovers and a lot of training thanks to all of the other Kanto gym leaders. So we make our way over to Gyarados, use a Rock Slide, and take it down in one hit, taking us to Exeggutor, but we still have Crunch on our moveset, so Exeggutor is not going to be much of a challenge. Which then takes us to Alakazam, but this Alakazam does outspeed and sets up a Reflect. Unfortunately for him, we used a special move, and therefore can take it down in one hit. Arcanine, despite being weak to Rock Slide, is able to survive, and he tries to keep it alive as long as he can with a full restore. But eventually, we're gonna be able to take it down and earn ourselves the victory and the final badge of Kanto. With all 16 badges, we can then meet up with Professor Oak, who will inform the guard in Victory Road that we're going to be able to go through to Mount Silver. But before arriving to Mount Silver, I make sure to pick up one last rare candy. As always, I try to make sure to do my first attempt at Red without using any rare candies. Unfortunately, Pikachu gets to go first in this matchup, so no matter what I do, I'm most likely going to get hit by a Charm. Therefore, going into Venusaur, I have no choice but to use Crunch, not only because it's my best move, but also because it doesn't use the attack stat. But unfortunately for me, a 2 times effective Solar Beam does a lot of damage. On the next attempt, I don't get hit by a Charm attack, but things still go pretty bad. So I'm forced to use 4 rare candies to level up past 2 damage rounding thresholds to get to level 63. But this increase is just not going to be enough. Yeah, I can do a little bit more damage to the Venusaur and even outspeed it now, but it's still not going to be enough because I'm going to take a lot of damage from Solar Beam. With no other choice, I decide to use the rest of my rare candies, which will get me to level 67. I really wish it was level 68, but it's the best I can do. At this new level, we can now 3-shot the Venusaur, which is good because then the Venusaur's not going to hit us with 2 solar beams. However, when we finally finish off Venusaur and move on to Blastoise, we just do not have much HP remaining, and we get taken out by the first Surf. Seeing as we can't even 2-shot the Blastoise, there's no point in testing this out for luck. It's just not going to work out, and we're going to continue losing. So we have to switch strategies here, and unfortunately, it's a strategy that most people don't like seeing, but it's a tried and true one. This strategy being Return, Rest, Sleep Talk, and Curse. Unfortunately, I didn't have Curse, so I had to go pick it up. But after picking it up, we finally have our final moveset, and this strategy is going to work. This strategy, of course, just being to spam Curse and then attack once fully set up. However, with Pikachu having a move such as Charm, things aren't going to go perfectly, as our attack and our defense are going to be a little bit unbalanced. Once I've taken enough damage from Pikachu, it's then time to use Rest. Once I've used Rest, we're kind of at the mercy of the Sleep Talk move. We could use Return and take down Pikachu, and that's exactly what happens. So we're going to need to do the rest of the battle with +4, +6, and -6. However, we stay asleep, we use a Curse, which does improve our attack. However, we take a massive Solar Beam, and because of our reduced speed, we're not going to be able to get the chance to use Rest on Blastoise, and we're taken down with a Surf. On the next attempt, the goal is to not get hit by Charm, and the goal succeeds as Charm fails, and therefore we get hit by a Thunder. And then we decide it's not worth going for it. We're going to keep 3 uses of Curse and take down Pikachu. I wanted to gauge just how many Curses we need for the win. Now, our speed is still going to be too low to be able to do anything. Luckily, Venusaur just sets up a Solar Beam and is taken down with 1 Curse. Then, we get really lucky as Blastoise only uses a Rain Dance, taking us to Espeon. Unfortunately, it does set up a Reflect, but we're still able to one-shot it anyways. But this means Snorlax now has double the defense on top of the amount of HP it already has. So our return isn't doing a whole lot of damage, and almost 2-shots it. However, Snorlax does get a rest off, but this gives us a few turns to work with, and the Reflect can't last forever. However, we do get flinched thanks to a Snore attack, but that's it for Snorlax as the next return takes it down, moving us on to Charizard, who can only use a resisted flamethrower, allowing us to get a return for the win. I really wish I could have beaten Red with its original moveset. Its original moveset is just so cool and so unique. It's such a great Pokemon. However, Pokemon like Venusaur and Blastoise having super effective moves against us is just not a recipe for success. In hindsight though, I probably could have just taught Curse, then used Curse on Pikachu, and after 2 or 3 Curses, attempted to beat Blastoise and Venusaur. I probably could have beaten Venusaur thanks to Solar Beam. However, Blastoise with Surf was going to outspeed me and hit me twice easily. Anyways, beating the game at 146 real time, 624 game time at level 68 with 23 resets. After you take a look at our current standings, you'll realize that I finally reached peak Gen 2. I probably can make minor improvements from here, but we're going to start seeing times where Pokemon are going to be beating other Pokemon and not beating others. With that said, Tyranitar basically tied Mew. However, it did get a lot more resets and struggled at a lot more parts of the game. So I think 3rd on our leaderboard should be good for now. If you guys don't check out my community tab, you'll probably know that we're going to be starting to do some Gen 1 randomizers soon. So keep an eye out for that, as we're going to be doing that in addition to our regular content. Make sure to check out a stream once in a while, because I'll be able to talk to you guys directly, and it makes for a lot funner content. And lastly, if you enjoyed what you saw and you want to contribute to the team, make sure to check out my Patreon page. Link will be in the description below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you guys next time.